I'm Neil Botcher. I'm Deloitte's Future of Health leader, and I'm so thrilled you could join us today. We've got a fabulous panel, and we're going to talk about Forces Reshaping Health. Before we get into it, I thought what I would do is set the scene a little bit and share the Deloitte point of view on where this is all going. And then the conversation that'll follow will get into some of the nuance as we move through this story. So, visually see in front of you, the Wave Zero legacy health system is essentially the health system we've been at for the last 70 plus years post-World War II. It's independent sectors all looking to maximize their own returns. It's a consumer that's on the fringes of the overall ecosystem. And while we're all out there trying to do the right thing for the individual in many cases is a secondary part of the story. The consumer is a secondary part of the story. What we've observed from other transformations in other industries is that the way transformations occur is when you have pressure from the outside coming in, and it requires the incumbent structures to respond. And that's exactly where we think we are today, this fragmentation moment of Wave 1, this proliferation of wildly ambitious, creative, technically advanced, consumer-centric ideas that frankly you see a lot of at CES this year, last year, and the previous 4 or 5 years. And that's where we are. We are in this really interesting fragmentation moment where so many novel ideas are playing out, some of which are direct competitors to the legacy structure. So think virtual health solutions as challenges to classic brick and mortar in-person provision of care. But then you've got lots of novel solutions where the classic system never really got to it in a meaningful way at all. Mental health issues, wellness issues, hyper early disease detection issues, et cetera. So all of that's happening in that fragmentation moment. Where we think it's now going to go is this industry reassembly. And we think reassembly is where the magic happens and where the value is going to be created, because it's essentially where your incumbents are going to gobble up some of these new movers, these new emergers. And whether you want to call it an acquisition or a combination, whatever the case is, you have a fundamental transformation of the power structure from these classic sectors that were separate to now these sectors that are intertwined, interrelated, and integrated with all the great innovation that's occurred in the fragmentation moment. And that's what we're going to call reassembly. And then what happens after that is this notion of an age of biology, where all of that now happens, but it happens at an N of 1 personalized level. So in some ways you can think about the journey from left to right as being rule of thumb health to N of 1 health. And that's the journey we believe all of this is on, and we think it's a 20-year journey, and we think we're roughly midway, maybe not quite. So Deloitte's recently released a Future of the Health consumer paper to sort of articulate this point of view. And the heart of our point of view in this paper that's just come out, and we'll give a QR code here in a moment that you'll be able to pull down during the course of the session. The heart of the paper is essentially the point that you see here, which is historically consumers have had limited knowledge, but tremendous opinions about where they want their health to go, though they may not have the health literacy to express it with real precision, but they are opinionated. And the healthcare professional is really the central figure that monitors, observes, and drives the activity. What we're arguing is in 2030 and beyond, the consumer is going to elevate to the CEO of their own health, armed with information that's spitting off of wearables, nearables, other devices, other data being translated for them through AI applications that make it possible for laymen to maybe understand really complex dynamics. And that moves the healthcare professional from somebody that was a central figure to one that is now maybe a co-pilot or a coach. And that is a radically profound comment, because you're now moving physicians and clinicians from the lead to a support role. And we're not saying this is going to happen overnight, and we're certainly not saying this is going to happen for all therapies or all therapy areas immediately, right? Cancer is a much more complicated dynamic than maybe, say, early stage diabetes. So we're not suggesting at all this happens overnight, but it is a direction that we believe this is all going to flow into. And if that's true, what it means is the consumers ever more at the center of their health, their view of what that means, and their definition is going to be much more than just sick care. It's going to be a radically broader definition of health that includes wellness and well-being and encompasses things like mental health, emotional health, along with physical health. So in that paper, what you'll see are a couple really interesting data points. The increased financial strain, year-on-year increase in per capita out-of-pocket healthcare costs rising radically. 1 in 3 consumers feeling less prepared to handle the unexpected costs in care. and a decrease in trust. 80% of consumers wouldn't return to the same provider. 36% of consumers skip through avoided care due to lack of trust. So you have real pressures in the system that are talking about, hey, if an alternative option comes along here, I might jump at it as a consumer. And so that's what you see on the right side. 57% have wearables to track health metrics. 51% are likely to tell their physician that they disagree. I can tell you that number was much, much lower going back even 10 years ago. 48% are using Gen AI with health as a top reason to translate, help me inform what's going on within me. So we think this is primed for the transformation that we're talking about. And so, I'll bring our folks out here in a moment, but let me unpack this visual here for a moment. These are all, I think, call them jobs that consumers are handling or addressing when it comes to health. And you see the categories on the bottom, choices or decisions that run on their insights versus areas in which consumers call their own shots, or areas in which consumers are deciding based on their own experiences, or just the fact that they want to try new things. And it's driving really robust new choicing and what we're calling shoppable moments for consumers to explore and investigate and navigate health in ways that historically have just not been an option. And so this is a really interesting graph. You see the QR code up in the upper right corner. Please feel free to click on that, pull the paper down. And so with that sort of as the setup, I want to bring out our panelists here, a really tremendous group, and we'll have them join me on stage. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to settle in. We have about 33 minutes or so to really get into this. So maybe before we get going, maybe each of you a quick comment about who you are, where you play, and we'll go with that.
Great. I'm Dorothy Kilroy, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Oura Ring.
My name's Christian Liu, and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Go-to-Market Strategy at Google Health.
I'm Tom Swanson. I lead marketing and strategy for healthcare at Adobe.
So I'm unbelievably excited to have the group of three join me here. And so we're going to get into this, and we're going to hit this from a couple angles. Question one, and it's a theme that we've been hearing at CES for a number of years, which is it's all about the data. It's all about the data. Well, as we're reflecting on this, maybe Dor, we start with you. Is it still all about the data, or are we at the point where we have enough and it's about translating that data, or are we still somewhere in between?
Great question. I believe that we're at a point where it's not just about gathering the data anymore. I think it's about making the data sure that it's quality data, but also that it's relevant and actionable for the user. I think we've now entering that frame. I'm personally really excited about the move away from having a doctor have to interpret all your data, technology to have to interpret all your data, to you actually can be empowered to be, I think you called it the CEO of your own data, and being able to actually do that yourself. I think wearables are certainly making a strong case for that, literally having the data at your fingertips. But for a lot of people, they still don't know how to just interpret that data. And so we're going to have to make sure that it's really user-friendly in a way that they can actually action on it.
So Christian, do we have enough that if you have the interpretation tools, it becomes actionable?
I think we're definitely getting there this year. As I think about your first question of do we have enough data, I look at all of us on stage, and we all have at least one tracker or wearable on us, which is not necessarily true if you look back a few years. And so there's definitely a point where most people, or many people, are having the tools to track that data and information. And what's really key to that is making sure that no matter which device you have, no matter what number of wearables you have, you as a consumer or a user have access to all of that information and can share it in the right way and can make sense to it. And so to your point around, do we have the tools to make sense of this information? I think it's a really exciting time because of generative AI, because of artificial intelligence. We've been able to see how our tool sets like Gemini, which is our latest large language model, can be applied to finding correlations in data, not only in one specific device or tracker, but across a swath of different data. And that's really exciting to me.
So Tom, from your seat and from the Adobe seat, you've got a very unique, I think, lens on the health space, because you're looking at, I think, a lot of enterprise infrastructure and a lot of the guts of what makes this go, in some cases, focus on the incumbents, but you're also, I know, playing with some of the upstarts. Thoughts on the data, thoughts on the AI element here to make sense of it?
No, I appreciate the context, Neil, because I was going to take a different tact, right? And instead of talking about consumer access to and use of data, I'm going to talk about like the incumbent payers and providers and, you know, the pharmaceutical companies, life sciences industry. I would argue that, of course, we have enough data, right, in those spaces. I mean, the healthcare industry as a whole has more data than any other industry. The question is, are you using the data in an appropriate way, right, and using it in a way that is actually of value to your consumers, right? Can you use that data to provide value, to provide, you know, to build trust in order to enable your consumers to kind of be a proactive participant in their own wellness, right? The data is there, right? But I think the biggest problem that we have as an industry is not using it in a timely manner, or being afraid to use it because of legal and regulatory constraints. When the consumers have made it painfully clear, right, that we want our doctors and our insurance companies and, you know, even our pharmaceutical companies to use our data to serve us. And so it's getting them over that hump of being comfortable using the data that they've got, I think is the transition point where we are.
So maybe stay with you then, Tom, on that piece of it, which is how do we get past this regulatory concern, this fear of doing wrong or the fear of misusing data? You know, in my travels, organizations are so concerned about hacks and data leaks, and in many ways it's in the way of the capturing and the insight generation and the interpretation and the tailoring of solutions because they're covering their flank on the risk side of this. Mm-hmm. Do you see a way to out of this in the moment, or do you think we're kind of still in this balancing act?
Well, I mean, of course I see a way out of it.
Well, tell us.
It's a matter of, first of all, getting your organization comfortable with the notion of using what is called protected health information. And then leveraging the technology that's available in order to help you use it in a compliant way. Right? There's technology that's available that, you know, secures the data from both a privacy and security perspective, like particularly where HIPAA is concerned, that you can govern, right, who has access to the data, who can use it in what way. And I think once you leverage that technology and you kind of get over the organizational hurdle of being comfortable using it, it's a matter of then being transparent to your customers with what data you're collecting and how you intend to use it, right? And I think if you are transparent, use it only in that way, get their consent to use it, you know, and then there's technology that can help you manage consent and, you know, customer ID, so that you can attach that consent to a particular consumer one-to-one. Those are the kinds of things, right, that I think the technology's there, you get over it perceptually, right, and if you're transparent, you build trust, you get consent, you absolutely can do it.
So it's interesting because you're coming at it from a established incumbent lens. So Dor, maybe over to you, you are born around the consumer.
Right.
So is that the way forward from your perspective?
Yeah, I really believe that especially in this era, we are